So Nicolas and I have been traveling around Scandinavia for a couple of weeks now, and we took a lot of pictures. And since he is shooting with Nikon, I'm shooting with Canon, and Canon recently announced the R5 Mark II. We obviously also did some kind of gear talk, and we were sometimes jealous of the functions that the other person had with his camera. And we thought it would be fun to do some kind of a wish list, what we would wish for in a Nikon Z9 Mark II or even Z8 Mark II. I think most features will be shared, but there is at least one that I can think of that I would wish for the Z8 II specifically. And yeah, let's see what will happen in reality, but we just share what we would wish that would be improved for wildlife photography.
I guess we can start with the obvious one, which is the Precapture,
Yes.
not only in JPEG, which is currently available, but also the Precapture in RAW, which would just help with a lot of situations. We saw, for example, with the red-throated loons that we photographed, especially when they're like flapping with their wings or they're taking off. It just would help a lot if you have the Precapture. I think, or personally for me, I think I missed at least a few images just because I wasn't really paying attention, and I think the Precapture just would help a bit with getting those images.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I would also like if this would be implemented in a way that you can easily like activate and deactivate it with the press of a button, because probably I would not use it most of the time just for specific situations, otherwise you just end up with too many images, I guess. And what goes a bit hand in hand with Precapture, I wish the camera would be even faster. So now we have 20 frames per second in RAW, which is good for, or enough for me, for like 90-95% of the situations. But especially for starting birds, birds taking off, for birds like just randomly flapping with the wings, or even if you have songbirds that just jump for catching an insect in flight, and there's just situations I wish I had more options to choose from afterwards in terms of wing position and so on. So I would wish for at least 30 frames per second.
Yeah, for sure. I also had some situations like with kingfishers that they just flew past me, and I basically got like the whole sequence of images, but the frequency of the camera basically just matched the frequency of the bird flying. So I just got like 20 images of the kingfisher in the same wing position. So I think increasing the frames per second would be kind of helpful in that situation for sure. Obviously that's kind of a niche, I guess, but in general it just helps with choosing like the wing position. So for sure having like 30 frames per second or even 40 would be quite nice. I mean, it doesn't have to be like constantly, I think. Even like some bursts of like just a second or two would just be helpful in some situations for sure.
So I think the current buffer would be enough for me, even if you increase it to 30 or 40 frames per second, because these situations where I really need the 30 or 40 frames per second are usually when I really take a very short burst. So I think this would still be fine, and we see now that the CF Express cards also get faster and faster, so I guess the new cameras would also like support this faster speed, and then I don't have any issues here. What I kind of wish is that the Z8 Mark II would also have a second CF Express Type B slot. I think we both agree, because at this, on one side I see that the competition is doing the same. Sony and Canon are also having CF Express and SD, but I don't really see the point of SD cards are cheaper, because if you buy a fast SD card, it's actually more expensive than a CF Express Type B and still much slower. So I think you agree, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me personally, that's why I also prefer the Z9 over the Z8. Yeah. It's just because I have twice the CF Express. So yeah, I think that would be a nice addition for the Z8 Mark II for sure. So another addition that I would like to see is actually a lower base ISO. I mean, both these cameras are kind of unique in the way that they already have quite a low base ISO of 64, but I would like to see that kind of extended to, let's say, 32 or even 16, which should just help in some situations. I mean, let's say, for example, backlit situations where you photograph against the sun, when you want to have like this colorful sun ball. This would be one addition for sure.
Quick question, was the 1/32,000 of a second not short enough, or do you want to have even better image quality?
I think it's just, I mean, that's one way of extending it with the shutter speed, but I think it would just prolong the moment during an evening where you can basically get these images, because you need the sun quite low. So I think if you have a lower base ISO, you can just help with that a bit more. Also, if you have like these these bokeh effects, these bokeh balls, I think you would just get those nice colors for a bit longer in the evening. And also, I mean, you can shorten the exposure time for sure, but for like landscapes, it will definitely help if you get a lower base ISO. So
basically it would reduce the need of ND filters for landscape photography, or panning shots or whatever. Yeah. So one thing that I would really like to see improved is the autofocus. I think the autofocus of the Z8, Z9 is very sticky. Once it has the target locked, it stays very consistent. Also in backlit, it works quite well. The only downside that I see is, compared to even the original R5, it has sometimes a bit more struggle to pick up the subject. This initial subject recognition seems to work better with the Canon cameras. I'm not 100% sure if it's that the Canon cameras have like so much more focus points and they might be smaller, if this helps to detect the bird if it's smaller in frame. I need to say, for most situations it's not an issue. It's more if I want to put the bird small in frame and the bird is flying, so spot autofocus doesn't work well. Granted, this is not like what I do on a daily basis, but for these situations I wish that the Z9 Mark II would also be a bit improved.
I think for me, like the major or the largest issue I have with the AF is not really the recognition, because if occasionally it doesn't recognize the birds, I kind of have some workarounds which work fine, that I still can focus on the birds. But it's more that I would like to see some smaller AF points, or just more in general, especially for like these portraits, which I kind of like to do a lot. So if you're really close to the bird, and especially at f2.8, you kind of have this shallow depth of field. So the exact focus is kind of crucial. And sometimes I feel like even if the AF recognizes the eye perfectly, because the AF points are kind of large and there aren't that many, it just occasionally focuses on like some sort of feather in front of the eye, or if like a heron, for example, looks towards you, you kind of have this really long beak in front, and even though the kind of the focus box is right in front of the eye, it just focuses a bit in front because there's like this huge three-dimensional space. So I think having like more focus points which are kind of smaller would help a lot. Obviously the recognition, there's always room for improvement, but I feel like that wasn't really an issue for me. It's more like having these more exact focus points. That would for sure be a nice addition.
I have one more thing that I would wish about the body. So I think first of all we can say the weather sealing is quite fine. What I would like is a third dial for setting the ISO, for example. I'm just used for my Canon cameras to have these three dials, and I find it's much quicker than needing to press the ISO button and then change the dial. And I don't understand why the Nikon cameras don't have this, because you have this multi-controller or something in the back, and I don't find this super useful because it's kind of redundant with the joystick. So I just wish there would be a third dial. I think this would really help me to change the exposure more quickly in manual mode.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think it would be nice to see like a third wheel where this multi-function control is. As you've said, like there is some redundancy. So, and you have, if I want to select something in the menu, I usually just use the touch screen. So I think having a third wheel would for sure be a nice option. So when it comes to controls, what I would like to see is I mean, we've mentioned like the increased frames per second, as well as the Precapture that we only want to use in like select moments. So I guess I would prefer to have like the option to choose it whilst using the shutter button. So for now, when you have pressed the shutter button, you either do nothing at all if you use back button focus, or you kind of focus. What I would like to see is that if you have pressed it, that you would have like the 5 frames per second, and then when I fully press it, it's just the full 30 frames per second.
Yeah.
So kind of having 2 levels of shutter or frames per second on the shutter release, or kind of having the pre-capture if you have press it or just fully press it. That would be a cool function for sure.
Yeah, and sticking with the body, I really like this flip out screen that it kind of stays on the vertical, on the optical axis if you flip it out. That's really nice for kind of following the birds. However, if I record myself as like I'm doing now, it's sometimes a bit frustrating that you cannot tilt it out in front. So some kind of design that Sony has with the A9 Mark III, where you have basically everything combined. This would really be cool to be included as well in a successor of these cameras.
Then one thing that I guess it's kind of in the same, or it goes in the same direction as like the halfway press of the shutter button, would just be double clicks. I feel like you have quite a lot of customizable functions now in the camera, but you, especially for the Z8, you kind of run out of buttons quite quickly. So having the ability to kind of have 2 functions on your button, one just pressing it and one double pressing it, would be kind of a nice option, I guess. I'm not sure whether you would actually use it that often, but for me, I think I would have some things to kind of put on these double clicks for sure.
Always better to have it and not use it
Yeah.
in the end than the other way around. Is there anything else, like in terms of customizability, that you would like to see?
So what I've really liked, that you can basically set some settings, so a custom shutter speed or aperture, and just put it on a button. So when you press it, it just goes to these settings.
Yeah, I also use this quite often.
Then you can just set it once for a button, and it just stays, or you cannot choose different settings for different buttons. So you're just kind of locked in with the one setting. I would like to have it that you can, let's say, choose some settings for like panning images on one button, and then one setting for like really fast action on another button.
Okay, yeah.
That would be another nice addition.
So one thing I noticed more about the Nikon Super Tele lenses, the new ones, is in general you have less buttons. There is more things done in camera, such as the image stabilizer. And for the focus limiter, you only have basically 2 settings. You have the full range, and you have one for, I think here it's 6mm to infinity. And sometimes on my Canon lenses, I also use the shorter setting. For example, if I shoot from a height, I know the birds will land on this branch. I use the 4 to 16 meters. And that's something that is kind of missing here. And I'm wondering if in general there would be the option to fine-tune your kind of do 2 or 3 presets of different distances, and then just select the one that you need in the camera menu. Possibly also by just clicking a button several times, that you kind of go through the different options.
It would be for sure cool if you kind of have like, similar to this, you have like this full range.
Yeah.
You have like one limit from infinity to a set position. Maybe you can use like the focus preset to kind of get your X, so you kind of have a variable that you can set. So let's say infinity to 20 meters, but then also the case for you just want 20 meters to your minimal focus distance. I think that would be a really nice addition, especially also if you want to shoot like birds in flight and you just want to exclude like the background, so the camera only looks for like subjects in kind of the air between background and yourself. I think that could speed up like AF acquisition quite a lot as well. One thing that I like to use in those cameras is the auto capture, which just photographs basically for me. So I kind of put the camera somewhere, and whenever bird or an animal passes, it should take images. Obviously, you need the animals to pass by, which this time didn't really work. But so you just want to put out the camera for quite a lot of time. And now in Norway or in Scandinavia in general, it's not really an issue because during the summer you kind of have light throughout the whole day. But like for example in Europe or in Western Europe, you kind of, because you have the night, you don't really need to use the auto capture, so you could just basically put it into sleep mode. So I would really like to see kind of have a real schedule, so I can say start the auto capture on 6 o'clock in the evening, end it after sunset, and then start again the next morning for 3 hours, and then in the evening again, which would quite help a lot in some projects, especially if you add like a power bank, a big one, so you can power the auto capture for several days.
Yeah, and I guess especially if you have animals that you know are active really early in the morning, late in the evening, and I think it could be quite easy that Nikon just divides 24 hours in half-hour slots, and you select active or not active, and then you can even select multiple time windows during the day.
I mean, the Z9, they have added the possibility that you can start it at a certain hour, like you say, start it at like tomorrow at noon, but then you don't set an end date, or like you don't.
You cannot
especially
restart,
you don't restart.
Yeah,
for sure. That's like the main issue, but I guess it's just also dependent that you use kind of a secondary battery to power it for longer periods.
So I think we got quite an extensive list of wishes, and don't get us wrong, we think these are great cameras already, but at some point there will be a successor, so we thought it would be fun just to discuss about this. We would also be curious if you have more ideas, especially for nature and wildlife photography, what kind of new features or improvements you would like to see implemented. Just let us know in the comments, and then hopefully see you again with another video with Nicolas.
See you.